Okay, hi everybody, and good afternoon here from Finland. We have been looking at the 5 remaining points, well, at the remaining point, which is 5-fold, uh, in letter number 8, I believe. And this point has to do with how we access the master, or what kind of evidence there is that we have been accessing the master. Now, so far, we've dealt with 2 points particularly. One is the use of the master in the heart meditation, and the other is the sensing of the vibration at the top of the spine, base of the skull, or in the ajna center, the brow, some point in the brow, and also the top of the head. Now we go on to 3 additional points, 3 additional points that he wants to make, and we have a little bit to go before we enter letter 9. Well, I think instead of letter 9, we'll enter letter 10. Letter 9 has to do with the new esoteric schools, and I've already written a commentary on that, which is about, it's a lengthy commentary. However, I think after finishing the work on letter 10, which has to do with purification, I'll go back and I'll make a video recording of letter 9, because it may be more convenient for some to use it that way. I remember back in the Walkman days, which were this was in the early 80s. I used to take the recordings of Alice Bailey and go out for a run, and I listened to many books that way. Now, admittedly, the visual component is important, and I sometimes refer to visual aids, and you can't really do that when you're in the car, unless you have some elaborate setup, and that would take your attention away from the road. Nevertheless, sometimes the video commentaries do have their purpose and their value um, beyond the written commentaries, though the written commentaries are perhaps more in detail and in some ways maybe more accurate. Okay, so here we go. So DK tells us we now have our 3 remaining points to take up, having already dealt with the 2 that touched upon contact with the master in the cave of the heart and the recognition of his vibration. And there's a section, I can't tell you exactly where it is right now, but probably in the Dyna books, where he says, look, you've got to really learn how to discriminate between vibrations. There may be the vibration of your own soul, the vibration of the group soul that you belong to on the inner planes, the vibration of the ashram itself, the vibration of the master at the center of the ashram, the vibration of another master. Well, how do we learn how to discriminate? Well, I would say, practice makes perfect in this case, and a careful um, analysis of what has been experienced. I'm sure all of us have been touched at one point or another by a vibration which is felt. I remember the Tibetan describing some kind of ripple effect. When I was 20 years old, um, at a certain point of relatively high aspiration, I experienced some strange ripple effect in the top of the head, and I felt it was unusual, and I felt increasingly over the years that it had been some kind of interconnection. I couldn't distinguish what. Maybe the soul, who knows, at that time. It was a long time ago, 57 years ago. But now, when DK used that word ripple, I recognized it immediately. It's funny how, you go back to different points in your life, and the significance of those experiences become clear much later. It's kind of the creating of a web uh, where experiences are at last put into the light of day, and they are understood. And I'm sure each of us in our own way has, experienced something of this kind of touch from the uh, higher points of tension, making their way into the lower points of tension. There are still 3 other ways, the Tibetan says, out of many, forget not. Yeah, he has such an expansive point of view. Um, yeah, there are still 3 other ways out of many, forget not, whereby the earnest student may be conscious in the physical brain of having contacted his master. And that's important, at length. He tells us some of you have the contact, and you know it. Some of you have the contact and know it not, and others are striving for the contact. Now, obviously, the capacity to be inspired by the ashram and the master increases if the contact is truly real and not just a figment of the imagination. So that's another discrimination we have to make between the real contact and something that is perhaps desired but imaginary. Bringing through into the physical brain consciousness the memory of the master's ashram and the lessons imparted there. Now, this is kind of a point 3. As I said before, I know these numbers don't exist in the text, but they are of value. No, we don't want that. And for that reason, DK's method is to outline so many possibilities that just to keep things straight, sometimes you have to augment the outline. So, bringing through into physical brain consciousness the memory of the master's ashram. Remember, the ashram is not necessarily a place. It can be a place in a way, but more it is a point of tension. It is a sustained spiritual focus, which is undeviating. And perhaps we can raise our point of tension even in the hours of sleep sufficiently to, as it were, journey to the Master's ashram, just as Alice Bailey did. You know that story about her being kept waiting outside by Master K.H. in his ashram, I think during some hours at night, and he was playing the organ, and she finally got the lesson. He didn't call her in immediately. He just wanted her to hear that he, one of the great ones, not necessarily in his own estimation, but one of the great ones from our estimation, if he could take time out to send forth these waves of music and work at the upliftment, his own edification, the contribution to beauty and so forth, that she didn't always have to be in such a restless hurry, perhaps. I mean, the more you go, the more you realize what Alice Bailey took upon herself by basically saying yes to Master K.H. at a fairly early age, maybe in the middle of her teens, according to the autobiography, and then saying yes to the Tibetan after her protestation, "I'm no darn psychic," something of that nature, but he just being patient, having worked with her long before, which she did not realize. So just give me a try, just be patient and let's see what you think. And then, of course, all the ridicule that she faced from the conventional theosophists. Our estimation of her sacrifice can only grow as we stay with this work, and it won't be immediately that we realize how much she gave. So bringing through into the physical brain consciousness the memory of the Master's ashram and that which and the lessons imparted there. I had an old wonderful teacher, and he used to play with words, and when it came to the words lesson, it was less on, meaning that we had rid ourselves somewhat um, of the encumbrances that we normally carry with us and which block the downflow of the more real realms. So we're always shedding the limitations of our grossness, our non-refinement, and becoming more sensitive in the process. As the student perseveres in his meditation, as he increases his facility to throw himself into the right vibration, why is that word throw used? Maybe it has something to do with the antichorionic projection. It's kind of like a hurling into a higher state of consciousness. As the student perseveres in his meditation, as he increases his facility to throw himself into the right vibration, he builds up a pathway. Well, that's antichorionic language, isn't it? If so, we may term it, that leads him direct to his master. And this is a literal statement of fact. Okay, so it is. And he builds up a pathway that leads him direct to his master. This is a literal statement of fact. It sounds very much like some kind of antichoronic process. Remember that the ashrams these days, especially second ray, fourth ray, sixth ray ashrams, are found on the Buddhic plane. And when we build the antichorana, we do begin to penetrate into those realms where the masters normally focus their consciousness. Good work earns for the man in time the right to be with the master at stated periods. We might almost say, like, let's say, full moon periods, perhaps. This entails good work in meditation, coupled with active service for the race. Well, there is a royal road, but there's no road that is the speedy road. This is going to take work. And, there's an old story about the Dalai Lama and one of his students in some group setting asked him, so the story goes, what is the fastest way? The fast way, And he is said to have broken into tears and said, there is no fast way. But there are certainly respectable ways that will keep us from going off on time-wasting side tracks. So good work and service. Good work and service. This is these are the kinds of things that are mundane, or at least, if not mundane, they are not dramatic. They are not spectacular. And yet at the same time, they do work. So we can decide whether we'll be mature about it and accept that it is so, or whether we continue to look for what is glamorous, rapid, spectacular, and errant, taking us off the track. These intervals are rare at first, but come more frequently as progress is made. Stated periods. These intervals, maybe they're not only the full moon times, stated periods. Are rare at first, but come more frequently as progress is made. Gradualism, graded progress. There are references to the students of different grades who have proceeded gradually in a graded process. Even, when we go to elementary school and even high school, we receive grades to give us an assessment of what we have achieved. Of course, it's in the opinion to a certain degree of the teacher, and we may have differences with that assessment, but still the principle is there. There is a gradualism here, and DK tells us that any appearance of really sudden progress means that a lot of pre-work has been done beforehand, which is maybe hidden and which allows for the appearance of sudden progress, but it's not really sudden at all. It has been prepared in the normal way. These intervals are rare at first, but come more frequently as progress is made. He will then become aware of his contact through remembrance on awakening, or, being awakened when that event is over. That contact, whether it's with the master or maybe someone that the master has designated to speak with and instruct the disciple, as in that stage we call Chela in the light. Of course, in that stage, the second stage, probably this kind of interview on the inner side is not customary, but the idea is there. It may be the master himself, or it may be someone the master assigns to assist with the handling of the disciple. So this is what we have to look forward to, not because it brings some kind of self-satisfied exhilaration, but because it opens the door. It opens the door of opportunity. And opportunity is related to Saturn, which means when we fulfill the requirements as meticulously as we can, then the door will open. He will see the room of the master and remember his associates in the work of the class, because there are these classes on the inner side, and sometimes a person, individual, is a student. We're all students. And sometimes it's a question of the individual having some degree of responsibility to teach students who have not yet come as far as he may have come. So all of these characteristic experiences of the inner side are real, and they are often forgotten because of the non-receptivity of the brain, but there they are, these classes at night. He will remember certain sentences as spoken by his master and will bring back a recollection of work suggested or of admonition, warning, because we do have to be kept upon the straight and narrow path, and there is an inner monitor, as it were. It is our own soul in a way, but sometimes the master himself warns. I'm remembering some instructions to RSU, who decided at a certain point after the usual Alice, well, at some point, I'll just say that she would like to pursue courses in psychology. And he said, I somewhat fear that for you, the conventional approach to psychology, basically hinting that she had enough with the esoteric psychology, and she did not need the external validation of having gone through some more conventional course. I remember, maybe suffering from the same kind of thought and taking some psychology courses. And I realized, at some point it was just a question of the blind leading the blind. That the teachers who have no esoteric knowledge or esoteric interest or inclination are simply offering something from the level at which they can function, which is fine. But it just cannot satisfy the esoterically thirsty, hungry, aspiring student. Well, we'll put it all together, at the end of life, we summarize everything and see where has been the gain and where has been the waste. And of course, the waste of time is a great regret. And we've all done it, But less and less that will be the case as our sense of what is truly valuable comes across. So he's going to see the room of the master, the people, associates in the class. He will remember certain sentences, certain admonitions, warnings. This is one of the methods which are indicative to the pupil that he is succeeding through the ability built up in meditation, in gaining access to the master. That's basically what we're talking about. 5 methods here of gaining access to the master, not not something that is to be taken at all pridefully or as if one were somehow special. DK tells us, don't ever act as if you're special. That opens the door to separation. You'll fall victim to the great heresy of separativeness. He warned us. He said, just because you're getting this kind of instruction a little bit earlier than will quite a number of other human beings, don't let it go to your head. Don't think you are special for some reason. I'm sure if we all look back, as Alice Bailey said, upon our previous incarnations, we would be quite appalled by the waste of time and the sidetracks we have taken and the general errors that were certainly avoidable, but that we did not avoid. So humility is the best policy, an adjusted sense of right proportion, seeing things in their true co-measurement, as Master Mori would say, seeing things in their true co-measurement with each other. It may not be dramatic, spectacular, glamorous, over the top, as some teachers seem to think their teaching must be, if it is to attract students, but it attracts them, but for the wrong reason. So anyway, that interview in the master's ashram, this is another method. Now, is this another one? It looks like method number 4, although he's not being very, he's not really separating it out very much or, bringing it to our attention that he's offering something new here. But it's the attainment of a certain amount of causal consciousness. I'll call that number 4, and if I'm mistaken, then I'll find out. But the previous one was all about that interview in the Master's ashram. Okay, so that seems to me to be distinct from what we're going to deal with right now. The attainment of a certain amount of causal consciousness to be increased as the third initiation and fourth initiations are approached. This is, this is indicative of the pupils having developed, mayhap, there's that old English again, in small degree, yet definitely realized the power to enter somewhat into their world. Now, we may talk about it without really anything that is a real experience indicative of their world. So this is a real entry, not only into the world of the soul. At first this will be the world of what we call the soul. But another 5 years after all this was written, there was a great change in hierarchy at the Centennial Conclave, and the possibility of the ashrams changing their vibratory position, and many of them moving to the Buddhic plane. But at first, this is causal consciousness. The faculty of abstract thought and contemplation, the power to transcend the limitations of time and space, one of the first illusions, are powers of the body egoic. And as all egoic groups are, as aforesaid, controlled by some one master, the development of egoic consciousness, when consciously recognized, is indicative of contact and excess. This is important material. So, are any of us now moving into that area of really being able to think abstractly? We've had some classes and discussions about how to do that and what it is. And always read From Intellect to Intuition, where Alice Bailey lays out the different methods of meditation, among which is an excellent chapter on contemplation. So really refer to that if we want to understand what we have to enter into here. Something beyond our normal use of the mind in normal meditation. Transcending the limits of time and space. Easily said. But there is a soul type of perception which at intervals allows us to do that. And we are in certain egoic groups internally. I guess at this point in the 1920s, we're talking about groups on the higher mental plane. They're all controlled by some one master. And so if we develop that kind of egoic consciousness, we're having contact with the master. We have to realize that. The development of causal consciousness is, to a certain extent, contact with the master. Many souls unconsciously contact their ego, souls in incarnation, we might say. We are all of us souls in incarnation. Many souls unconsciously contact their ego and temporarily have flashes of egoic consciousness. But when the pupil can consciously raise himself, consciously, at will, that's where the science comes in. And when he, with deliberation, intensifies his vibration, with, free choice, he intensifies his vibration. I'm just going to kind of mark these things out here because there are sort of some important words involved here. And transfers his polarization, his fixity, we might say, into the body egoic, even if for a brief moment, then he can know that he is, for that brief moment, vibrating to the key of the master of his group. And with that kind of group affiliation and contact with the master, there is an empowerment which occurs. I'm putting it kind of in the indigo color here because that is the preeminent ray for all of us in the larger synthetic sense, whatever our egoic ray may actually be. Likely, though, in these occult groups to be either ray 1 or ray 2. Okay. He has made contact. He may not remember in his physical brain at first the details of that contact. He may not realize the appearance of the master or the words that passed the master's lips, but having consciously conformed, now, there's that word, and it means Saturn. Oh, Lord. Having consciously that's a Saturn word, right? Having consciously conform these intervals to rule, and I'm going to and entered within the silence of the high places. The law ever works, and he has made his contact. Okay. Now that's what we're striving for here, and if we weren't, DK would not include it as a method. So yes, this is something that is to be achieved by us. He may not remember at first in his physical brain. He may not realize the appearance of the master, although there have been so many now images brought forward that, probably we can somewhat realize the appearance of the master, even if not perfectly, or the words that passed his lips, but having consciously conformed these intervals to rule and entered within the silence of the high places. The law, and that's the thing about law, because it's the will of a higher being, and it is sustained without deviation. The law is not just lifted on occasion to apply here and there and not elsewhere. The law ever works, and he has made contact. Some disciples know their master intimately on the inner planes, and work under his direction. But many lives may elapse before they comprehend the law, and with deliberation, that is definite choice, can make the channel of access, Antakarana-like, through the power developed in meditation. Yet this is held out to us not only as a possibility, but as a definite eventuality, let us say. Now, there are those people whose orientation is so much towards the hierarchy that they forget the other side of the equation, which is the importance of their service below. To look above, to help below, to dream not nor to rest, to toil, to serve, to reap, to pray, to mount the cross, to tread the way, to tread upon my lower self, and enter into peace, the peace of the high places, not the normal cessation of conflict. So we begin to see how 100 years ago, Master DK laid all of this out in a way that would be sure and proper guidance for every one of us, if we but take it seriously and persist. As time elapses, says the Tibetan, this ability to contact increases until the point is reached when the pupil can at any time find out what is the will of the master and have access to his heart. Well, this would mean the stages of Chela within the aura, and later the Chela within the heart. That's what it would mean. And how beautiful it is, these sequences, these graded sequences of progression, if we but follow the law. Now, sometimes we just think, hey, the law doesn't really apply to us, or we might be able to circumvent it somehow. It won't apply in this case, but it applies always. And there's nothing glamorous about this. There's no sudden bestowing of unearned access, unearned gifts of higher contact, unless the work, preliminary work, is done. Now there's another method here that's given, and it looks like the fifth method. As I say, EK is not especially marking these out, but we get the idea. Here's the fifth method. Through sound, the aspirant is aware of success. So it's not so usual, but let's see what he will say about it. He follows his usual form of meditation. He perseveres from day to day and works on all the three planes over the work to be done. He continuously raises his vibration and aspires. That's necessary, And we can't just say that it's only necessary for aspirants. We're all aspirants. Even the high beings are aspirants to a higher state, and aspires in the needed endeavor, coupling all interior effort to the external life of loving service. Easily said, often repeated, difficult to actually experience. But okay, it can be experienced. And which one of these methods or ones are appropriate to any one of us, we will discover as we fulfill the requirements. At some one meditation, he will suddenly become aware of a note of music that seems to be sounded within his head or to emanate from his heart. I do believe, well, there may not be a one-to-one relationship, but Alice Bailey was contacted always by the Tibetan through a note, maybe something that she heard in her ear, apparently in her ear. And, you know, a lot of us maybe have that experience of the ringing in the ear. Okay. At some one meditation, he will suddenly become aware of a note of music that seems to be sounded within his head or to emanate from his heart. And maybe this will perhaps, this will depend upon the monadic ray. Head, heart, throat, 1, 2, 3, depending on maybe on the ray of the monad. It will not be evoked by the sounding of the sacred word, which word, when sounded by the man on a certain key, may call forth a musical response from the ego. The universe is pretty well manifesting through music, the Pythagorean idea. But it will come as a result or culmination of the meditation, and the sound of the note will vibrate within the center so distinctly as never to be forgotten. It is again an indication of success. So in our notebooks or whatever we want to call them, our journals, we note things carefully and truthfully, accurately, as much as may be possible. And this is yet another method of demonstrating that access to the Master has been at least somewhat achieved. The Master has been contacted and has responded by sounding the true note of the man's own ego. And there, you know, Blavatsky's laying out of the notes and the planets on the normal diatonic scale, beginning with the note C, comes into our thought. The Master has been contacted. At the same time, we realize that the student who is forever obsessed with contacting the master without the preliminaries of accurate and ongoing meditation, using the right methods, yes, and without the preliminary of the constant attempt to offer loving, needed service, will not achieve. So, we find ourselves going down a number of dead ends at times, and well, that didn't work, and we have to retrace our steps so that we can do it the right way. And this is really the basis of the custom of the doorkeeper, responding to the aspirant, would-be aspirant, to the mysteries of the group. I guess, they call this also in Masonry the Tyler of the Lodge, who carries the symbolic or the symbol of the flaming sword, which protects the inner work from the aspirant, unready aspirant, and which protects the unready aspirant from the inner work. When the work is properly done, the aspirant will sound the admission word in his own key or tone, endeavoring to strike the note that will evoke the ego. And okay, I'm sorry for that interruption. Sometimes calls come in and you just have to take them. So we're talking about the fifth method of accessing the master, and it's through the hearing of a note, and it will vibrate within a particular center. Mostly, I would say the centers associated with the egoic ray, or perhaps the monadic ray. It will not be evoked, I'm going back a little bit, by the sounding of the sacred word, which word, when sounded by the man on a certain key, which I suppose the master will eventually convey to the student, may call forth a musical response from the ego. But it will come instead, as a result or culmination of the meditation. And this is important. And the sound of the note will vibrate within the center so distinctly as never to be forgotten. Now, these are the confirmations which no one can gainsay. The student knows they have happened, and you cannot be told. It's just your imagination. So, as never to be forgotten, it is again an indication of success that one has contacted the master. The master has been contacted, it says, and has responded by sounding the note, the tone of the man's own ego. Now, note, it's kind of interesting. Notice that it is the master who sounds, the note, not just the ego, although that would be sufficient. But there's a cooperation always going on between the angel of the presence and the master, and also the presence of the extended monadic awareness into the higher mental plane. So really, three rivers of consciousness are going on within the causal body. And we said that this is the basis of the doorkeeper, responding to the would-be aspirant, to the mysteries of the group, and we called this in Masonry the Tyler, who is the replica on the outer plane of the angel of the presence with the flaming sword. When the work is properly done, the aspirant will sound the admission word in his own key or tone at the door, endeavoring to strike that note, the note that will evoke the ego. Notice when Master DK uses the word ego, sometimes capitalized, sometimes not, but it doesn't always make a difference. Sometimes it makes a difference as to what aspect of the higher life he's talking about, and sometimes it doesn't. So even when he has a lowercase e, ego, he will mean almost inevitably the at least the soul on the causal level that we call, at least in my view, the angel of the presence. The entirety of the solar angel just in a way couldn't fit within the causal confines. It's too big, too powerful a being, but a projection, having pervaded the entire universe with a fragment of myself. It's a fragment. We might say that the angel of the presence, at least in my view, is a fragment of the solar angel who is minimally on the Buddhic plane. So, we're going to learn in the new Masonry how to sound the proper note, to be admitted into the workings of the lodge. Now, this will occur on, maybe it will be replicated on the outer plane, but it will certainly occur on the inner planes. The doorkeeper will respond and chant forth the reply in the same full sonorous tone, thereby, through the power of sound, linking the man up with the master of the coming ceremonies. And this will be a time, a future time when the master is actually a part of the ceremonies, which will be real and not just analogical. That's coming with the restoration of the mysteries, largely under the guidance of Master R, at least their externalization. So the doorkeeper will respond. I suppose, while the Tyler is at the outer, stands outside the temple proceedings and allows or does not allow people in to the proceeding. or allows or does not allow certain thoughts or streams of energy into the temple proceeding. That's a more subtle work of the tiler. The doorkeeper will respond and chant forth the reply in the same full sonorous tone. The word chant is such a seventh ray word, and it has to do with the kind of seventh ray proceedings which are imminent in a seventh ray age, as the no, that's not going to do, is it? In a seventh ray age, when, there we go, the methods of procedure of the seventh ray are more fully embodied in the spiritual proceedings, the mysteries, really, that humanity will engage in. Somehow we're being, given an outline of that which is to come, and at different points in DK's teaching, he teaches us that, this is a distant prospect, or this is imminent. The new esoteric schools are, in their fullness, somewhat of a distant prospect. And the full expression of the mysteries in the Aquarian age also, I would say, are more of a distant prospect, though they are being prepared for even now. So the linking up, the true linking up of the aspirant or disciple with the master of the coming ceremonies, who will not simply be, let's say, an ordinary human being, but at least an initiate and maybe the master himself. This puts each member of the group, through his own effort and through the third factor, the doorkeeper, on rapport with the master. Now that's why I wanted those red things there to, what is the third factor, trying to remember it. Bringing through into the physical brain consciousness of the memory of the master's ashram. Well, this seems to be the third factor, and the lessons imparted there. Okay. All of these prospects seem most wonderful compared to what we now have. We're looking to the future. The quality of the hidden vision on the largely second ray shows us what will unfold. Okay. So sound is involved in this fifth method of accessing the master. The third factor, the doorkeeper en rapport with the master. Well, here it looks like this is a little different. I don't think we have to go back to factor number 3 about the interview. Let us say, rather, that the doorkeeper is the third factor, with the aspirant, or let's call him the candidate, and the master as the other two. In time, this will be more fully understood, and effort will be made to keep the tone reverberating between those who enter and those who guard the threshold. I guess there are the two factors we have to consider: the dweller on the threshold, which is the personality which must be attuned to a higher vibration, and then there's the guardians of the threshold who make sure that that actually happens. So isn't this all about maintaining a certain point of tension ongoingly, so that we do not fall in our point of tension and lose contact? Because if our point of tension is lowered, then the contacts achievable are reduced, are lessened. So a lot of our work is to use the focused immovable will, which is the definition of a point of tension, to sustain that point of tension, not allow ourselves to fall in our consciousness, which at first is so easy to do, unfortunately. When perfectly accomplished, a thing impossible now, it forms a perfect protection. Protection from what? Well, from lower states that emit energies which are not useful and which do not lead to greater realization in consciousness. When perfectly accomplished, a thing impossible now, it forms a perfect protection. Groups will be formed according to egoic formation and the particular master. The node of the group will be known to the one who guards the entrance, and no one can get in who sounds not the note in either the higher or lower octave. Musical references, and you know how octaves are. They sound very similar, but you can recognize them as a unison, a kind of unison, but they are separated by a doubling of the vibration. So, admission standards are high and exacting. And, well, unless we can sustain these matters, I'm sorry, I always manage to do something like that. And it's simply the law. No one can get in who does not, who get in who sounds not the note in either the higher or lower octave. This applies to groups consecrated to inner spiritual development and that are directly concerned with the work of a master or his affiliated pupils or disciples or probationers. So even when we're dealing with disciples and pupils of the master who are likely to be fairly high initiates or probationers, this idea of sounding the correct note is necessary. Other groups formed of units diverse and under different rays and masters will guard their door by another method later to be revealed. So we kind of ask, is GK speaking here of a second ray method? There are exact methods. Occultism, I'll call it spiritual occultism, is a science. And there's no gainsaying exact knowledge. Science is science, and it tells us what the laws actually are. And we have to adhere to them. We have to fulfill them. I've told you probably a couple of times, many times, that my old teacher, before finding the Tibetan again, no one breaks the law breaks them. He had a lot of first ray. When in meditation the student hears this inner musical note, he should endeavor to register it and cultivate the faculty of both recognizing it and utilizing it. This is not easy at first, as the sounding is both unlooked for and too brief to catch. So, this is a rarer occurrence than maybe the other methods of realizing that access has been gained to the master, or at least to his group, to his ashram. So it's not easy at first, as the sounding is surprise, both unlooked for and too brief to catch. But as time progresses and the pupil succeeds in again and yet again getting a similar response, then he can begin to find out the method and watch the causes that set the vibration in motion. In other words, what did I do prior to the appearance of the musical response that seemed to evoke the musical response? And the assurance then that the master has been contacted. What an amazing science it is. It is science, which is based upon exact knowledge, or knowledge tending towards exactitude, and no statement from the world, as it were, saying, well, that's fantasy, can convince the disciple for whom these things are real and impressive that they are not real and impressive. So we remain convinced, and we, with faith, and a well-reasoned faith, I think, follow what the Tibetan has advised us to follow. As I've said before, many are the methods whereby a pupil becomes aware of success in the path of access. Above are but 5 out of these many. It's not that we want to become in any way egotistically exalted by a realization that success has been achieved. It can't be achieved, cannot be achieved through egotism or through keeping the eyes of the personality upon the little self. We have to remove the eyes from the little self. Later, when the schools are organized, and when we say later, DK has his notion of when they will be organized, had them, his notions, but sometimes there is delay and the unexpected arises. Perhaps the precipitation of the Second World War was unexpected. though certainly possible in and latent in the situation as it existed. Also, the intervention of the Lords of Liberation in the winter of 42 and the beginning of 43, that was unexpected too, because the hierarchy had been, in a sense, packing its bags, thinking that humanity would inevitably go down to defeat. But invocation worked, even though inchoate, even though ill-formed by the masses and better formed by the disciples who were instructed in the manner of invocation. So there is flexibility, mutation on the inner side. And as DK has often said, even the masters don't know how this particular situation will work out in humanity. He was emphatic about that in the whole problem of sex, which seems in many ways out of control. And, given the entry into the Venus decanate of Aquarius, for the majority of human beings, Venus can be misused. And the lower attraction can close out a wiser handling of that energy. So there are still many unknowns. Later, when the schools are organized and watched over by a master in physical plane consciousness, records will be kept of the times and the modes of contact. And in this manner, much knowledge will accrue. Now, when you start to read in the rays and the initiations, it seems like the anticipation of the emergence of the new schools had to be delayed. And that much later in the process would they really appear. I would, in conclusion, point out that always the calling forth of the response must be the work of the pupil, and that the hour of that response depends upon the earnestness of his work, the consecration of his service, and his karmic liabilities. The hour of that response is pupil dependent. So we can't just wait for something good to happen to us while we hover at a lower than necessary point of tension. It must be the work of the pupil. And indeed, we are that, the pupil. So initiative, my friends, is required of us, and daring. Remember Master Moria's little section that he calls the Book of Daring, found in his Agni Yoga book. Daring. To will, to know, to dare, and to keep silent. Each one having a level of application. To will the spirit, to know the soul, to dare the personality, to keep silent the vehicles of the personality. So at least let us begin with some degree of daring, not really knowing what we're getting into, You can't, you know. You can't really know. You have to act before you know. And so many people want to know before they act, which under the circumstances of the path is not possible. When he, the pupil, merits certain response, it will be demonstrated in his stars. And naught can delay or hinder or delay. Equally, naught can really hasten, so the pupil need not waste time in doleful ponderings upon the lack of response. Again, the law and the importance of how astrology indicates the important moments when response can come. Even initiation, though merited, may be delayed because the stars do not, the planets, stars, astrology, do not occur in such a configuration as to allow the response or to allow initiation. So a great patience is required. I'll just give you a little autobiographical. As an Aries type, we are impatient. But I find that the realization of what infinity may be, I can never say is, a true super universal infinitude, if dwelt upon and understood more than is customarily the case, will be a great incentive towards patience. So here the pupil, the pupil is here. So we continue here. This is really the end of letter 8. It's been a long letter with many sections. Obviously, Alice Bailey couldn't take down everything in this letter in one day. So different dates are given. And now we learn what we must do again and yet again. Here's the part to obey the rules. Saturn. Saturn, the friend of disciples, the one who does not appear compassionate and yet is, the one who built the bridge from the previous solar system to the present one, for trapped humanity of that era to travel, and maybe since the Saturn chain has replaced the moon chain, I wouldn't be surprised involved in the transfer of human individualized souls from the third chain to the fourth. Sometimes I just have to offer speculations, and they will be of value or not. At least one can ponder them. Here's the part to obey the rules, to conform to the forms laid down. Saturn again. To ponder and wisely adhere to the prescribed instructions, very second ray. Let's just say a ray 2 approach, and to definitely work and to ardently serve his fellow man. There's a word for us. And that is something by reputation that the Tibetan has always had. Ardor for service, a great zeal, apparently, for service. We don't really know the Tibetan the way those who are more intimate to the ashram would know him. But we get the idea that he has been a disciple, an initiate of great enthusiasm when it comes to learning, when it comes to service, when it comes to carrying out in a humble manner the will of his superiors, uh, an initiate of real humility. So the story goes, and with the widespread study, you get that adjusted sense of right proportion or co-measurement. You know how much you count or don't count. You know. And things are put into proper proportion, and we begin to realize what's big and what's small, and we avoid the crazy distortions into which people fall when, well, many causes, but sometimes adverse aspects between Jupiter and Neptune just inflate fantasy beyond its normal place until it becomes a substitute reality for truth. And that's happening. Boy, that's really happening now. People are eager for some kind of fulfillment, but what way will they choose? When he, the pupil, has done all this, when he has built the necessary vibrating material into his three lower bodies, when he has aligned them with the body egoic, here's a summary paragraph, right? Even if only for a brief minute, suddenly he may see, suddenly he may hear, suddenly he may sense a vibration, and then forever he may say that faith is merged in sight, and aspiration has become recognition. Very beautiful, very inspiring, and one of those summary paragraphs where the Tibetan is really wrapping things up for us as the master teacher, which he is. Now, the next section is about, looks like 36 pages. And as I say, I've already meticulously, well, for me anyway, done what I could with written commentary. So somehow I feel the urge to finish the book and then go back to this with a possible verbal commentary. I don't want to get lost in this because it's likely to be a very full presentation as I consult my notes from the past. I've always been terribly interested in the new esoteric schools, and I trust that students that have worked with the Moria Federation and with the Arcane School and the School of Esoteric Studies, the Arcane School in its three headquarters and so forth, really are candidates in some future incarnation for participation in the new esoteric schools. And they have to know now how they can prepare and what to expect, even if those schools don't mature into their fullness for some centuries to come. We have to begin thinking about the way the masters stride centuries. They have, I saw the other day that film again about Robin Hood, and he was called Robin Longstride. Well, the that's the case with the masters. Their stride is great compared with the tiny footsteps of a human being. But more and more, we can learn to increase that stride, decrease the effect of a limiting ring pass not upon our consciousness, and prepare according to the law for better things to come. So that, if we were to go now to page 332, well, we'd have to go further than that, wouldn't we? It starts at 332, so it's a long section, and I really want to kind of close with that. Even though you have plenty to read, both from the Tibetan and from what I've tried to do in commentary, and it's been written commentary on the subject. So letter 10 is all about purification, and I'll get into it. And that takes us to the end of the book, which is basically the end of the book around page 350 or so. Would that be it? 349 and 350. He does sum it all up there, but we'll wait till we get to that point. We cannot deny, that we have been given great instruction. And of course, our lives karmically limited. Oh, goodness, that also goes on to letter number 11 as the result of service. So I'll do 10 and 11 and then get back to letter 9. Hope you don't mind me going out of order here, but at least in terms of my psychology and how to do, a better job, it seems like this would be the way to go. Especially since there's enough to read right now about the new esoteric schools. So our next work will be and of course it'll take us back to the basics, right back to the basics. And we'll say, wait, I've done a lot of study here, over time. Do I really need all of these basics? But so many people will discover exactly that they haven't even been fulfilling the basics. And so how can they expect the graded ascent which is offered to them if they will but fulfill the law and do it right, So as soon as I can, I'll get back into this. I always wish that on the days when I can do this, feel well enough to do it, I could just continue doing it, but then always responsibilities of another nature come along. And the responsibility tonight will be entry into a study of Shambhala, which has been, I think all the references have been prepared by an excellent compilationist of this era, Zach Reimel, who I guess has taken down all 729 something references and highlighted them in a way that is propitious for our study. So friends, with little interruptions and telephone calls and things like that, I don't know how long this this particular program will last, but we'll get it to you. And with the hope that you may benefit. So lots of love and many blessings to you. And I'll just pause the recording for a minute. Okay, so you see what we've done here, and jumped over the New School's material and gone into letter 10 and then letter 11, and then come back to letter 9. Because, of course, letter 9 is done in a written form. You know, done early because of my extreme interest in that area. So we'll be dealing with starting at page, let's say 332, and maybe later, you know, we'll see when that can be done. The purification of the vehicles, which of course relates to admission into the new schools, because unless there is some capacity for abstract thought, some intuitive stirring, if there's only, you know, concrete mind, you just can't be admitted. And the purification, we know, helps with the receptivity to the abstract mind and to the intuition, both of which are always there, but are deflected by that kind of crust that DK talks about, you know, the veils, the clouds, the unclean aspects regarding the lower vehicles which should be receptive. So naturally, this work will reflect back upon those who can actually enter the new esoteric schools of the future. Maybe a flash will come where you can see yourself, you know, as part of that, and see yourself as ever closer to the ashram and ever more capable of carrying out what it is that has to be carried out. I'm shaking a little here. I'm hitting the table. It looks like I'm going up and down. Okay. Okay, friends. So we'll get this to you. And you know, we've just been given an abundance to study and meditate upon and apply in service. And it really is the beginning. You know, we can say, well, life more abundantly is coming, but it's here now with us in this teaching. Abundant light, some reflection of the unfettered enlightenment of Shambhala, some little reflection, abundant. Do we know how to handle that abundance that's been laid at our doorstep? First, we have to appreciate what's been given, and that grows, that appreciation grows. At first, you know, books are books, but after a while, you begin to realize the depth, the scope of what has been given. And it really is extraordinary. I remember the first time I contacted the Bailey books, you know, there they were, you know, in a hard copy, in a little metaphysical bookstore in the Loop of Chicago, and run by a little old lady by the name of Hazel, of all things. But there they were. And I almost said, well, look, I'm working on theosophy right now. I'm working on the secret doctrine. I can't get back into that. I can't get into this new thing. But the very first thing I opened was kind of like a triangle. It said Atma Buddhi Manas, and I recognized those as, of course, theosophical terms, but I had no idea about how Alice Bailey would enlarge upon them, and I had no idea that the Tibetan was behind them. So it was a real reawakening. And it occurred almost 60 years ago, 55, 6, 7 years ago. I was really, really grateful, increasingly grateful. Gratitude, Master Moria tells us, with gratitude you have the greatest fires, the finest fires. So, okay, if our gratitude can grow for what we've received, and if our earnestness and adherence to the requirements of what we have received can grow, then we are guaranteed eventual success as we follow meticulously and according to the set forms laid down what is given as the true method of approach. We just have to have the trust that it is so. And, indeed it is so. Okay, so I'll get back to this when I can, and hopefully soon. And hopefully this will be delivered to you either on our website, or I think it's also a good one to put on YouTube, as there's no question, about rights and things like that. I'm sure that those people who own the rights, the Lucis Trust and so forth, do want to see the teaching propagated as widely as possible. So, friends, we'll see you now, and you take care. Bye-bye.